Okay, so this is the second one of these I've had. I bought one like 10 years ago, maybe something like that. But I left it up north and I'm down south right now. North being Alaska, south being the lower 48. So I figured I'd take y'all along for the ride to have a look at this one. I got it for local here. I got it for $49, 20% off. So for 50 bucks. This thing's pretty good, and I need it for a particular thing. It's useless compared to industrial 1.5-inch, 2-inch one, but it's pretty handy to have kicking around. I actually use these things for sharpening tungstens and similar stuff like that. And then right out of the box, that's in there. Instructions, toss that. A little bit of styrofoam. I think the last one I got was actually a display model, so, and again, that was a long time ago, 10 years, well, maybe not 10 years, yeah, something like, oh, it might have been more than 10 years. Alright, there it is, fresh from China. So in the box, it comes with your foot plate, or bed, whatever you want to call it. That goes there. Nothing's changed there. And then this guy goes through your foot plate there and it bolts in there. There's a recess right there. Put your nut. And so let's get some specs on this thing. What else do we need to know? 1 1/3 horsepower motor. This thing, they don't have any power. They're kind of gutless, but the thing I use these for is for dicking around making knives and stuff. And then when I cut a whole pile of square tubing, say I have a bandsaw running, cutting tubing, and while it's cutting, I'll be taking all the tubing and I'll clean up all the corners. Say this was a piece of tube we just cut, and I can clean it up, clean up my corners, and buff it out for welding or whatever have you. Now things, when I get this, I'll probably be leaving this off for now, but I'll keep this around so that I can use it in the future. But this thing comes off, it breaks off just perfectly fine. Don't need that. And then this plastic cover gets tossed. Because I got to get to this real right. Oh, coffee's on. Okay, so I got to get rid of that because I change these belts out pretty regular. Okay, changing the belts on these. That's done by this wheel here. They've got a spring right in there, and you can pull this guy. These are kind of crusty from the factory, but you can kind of loosen that up. There's that bolt there. Loosen that guy up, and it's a little easier to do. You want to keep that tight, but just loose enough that you can push this forward and backwards and let it travel. So you push it forwards to change the belt out. Now it's supposed to be spring loaded, but this little spring in here, it's a pissy little bugger. I don't know if you can see that. Go down to the hardware store or McMaster Car, or well, you don't go down to McMaster Car, but you can go down on the internet to McMaster Car and get one of these that's a lot stouter. It's a really, really, really nice upgrade. So anyhow, I leave this cover off, like I say, because I like to be able to change these belts out quite quickly. Sometimes I used to make a lot of spurs and bits and stuff. Well, not a lot of them, but every now and then I'd make a set of spurs or bit, you know, for like a horse or a buffalo, whatever you choose. And I would go through these different grits and stuff and want to change them out real quick and everything. I'll take this tab off here so that I can work with this belt and work on corners and stuff. Harbor Freight, to my knowledge, only sells an 80 grit and a 60 grit? No, an 80 grit and a 40 grit. But somewhere I had found some other grits in the past. It's been a while. Well, we're on belts and grits. I like to keep one of the zirconia ones. Of course, I just use the Harbor Freight ones or order some stuff online. I usually keep one of these on hand, just special for this bugger. Again, being able to swap this out real quick is nice. And then I'll keep this one just for sharpening tungstens. Of course, you want to wear a respirator and all that jazz while you do that, because that stuff's not good for you and all that jazz. Okay, so I have put quite a lot of hours on one of these. So much so that I burned up the stuff in here and had to rewire that, and just turning that thing on and off. That switch wore out, so I had to put a new switch in the old one. I don't know about the new ones, if they're any much different, but these motors are kind of gutless. I've always wanted to upgrade it, but the thing is, for the size of the belt, it's pretty good for sanding. You're not going to remove a lot of material, but I think if you're just getting into making knives and such, it's not too bad to start out with if you can get it for on sale for 50 bucks. I think normally it's 70, 75 bucks, and not too bad of a deal for little things. Another thing, you can get really fine belts, and you can use this to sharpen your chisels. This guy here, you loosen these two little Allen head screw fasteners here, and you can slide this in and out. Nice thing about that is that when you've got your belt on here, because it's useless without a belt really, when you've got your belt on here, you can set the clearance of this thing and have it push on it just a bit. That gives you a real nice flat surface to grind on the back of a knife or on a bit of square tube or whatever you're grinding on. It gives you a real nice flat surface to work off of. Okay, for shits and giggles, we'll just get that thing nice and square with the belt. Alright, so say if you do want to put this foot plate on there, easy enough done. They'll give you this little adjustable guy here. The way that we do this is we take this guy out here. Now that bolt goes in there. You can see a little recessed hex in there. That's where she goes. So that little recessed hex will keep the bolt from turning. Okay, now that we got our bolt in there, our foot plate or deck has a slot cut in it. And that goes on here in this such way, right over our belt. And then we'll look down here under her skirt, and you can see that bolt that we just put in there goes in that slot on the bottom of the deck. Now, off the back of that bolt, when we took it off of there, there's this washer, and that, I forget what that's called. The washer goes on first, and then our thing, I forgot what it's called, that keeps things from getting loose goes on. This is junk, but we'll put it on there anyways. Actually, nah, we're not going to keep that. So, well, you can put that on there, but I'm not. This guy here goes on. We'll hold it like this, and we'll push on this hex head little fastener screw there. And then we can turn this barrel while holding the bolt in there. And we can screw it on. Okay, now that it's somewhat tight, this guy came loose, but we can just tighten that guy up. It should be tight. Take the handle, and to loosen it, we turn it. Obviously that way. To tighten it, we go this way. If we need it more tight, pull the handle out, rotate lefty-loosey, then turn it, and there she gets tight. Right here on this guy, they have a set screw. I don't know if you can see that there. Yeah, the pokey bit there, that of course turns. What that is for is that you can set this table to level. So you can adjust that set screw there and set a repeatable square angle to your belt surface. So I've got this squared, and I can take my little Allen key and I can tighten that just till it touches right there. I'm going to lock it and then remove my Allen key, and every time I go down this way, and again because there's a slot, it can move in and out, which will give you a steeper angle. So I can be grinding on something like whatever here, you know, because I need this angle. I can repeat, go back to square angle by setting that Allen screw on that base back there. The only problem with that is there's really nothing retaining this Allen screw, and it's going to vibrate right out of there. So maybe go down to the hardware store if you really want that feature and find something to use as a lock nut on there. Okay, so when you first get this and you get a belt on here and all that jazz and you turn her on, it might want to just fly right off of there one way or the other, or it's going to move over here and it's going to eat into here. Well, that's because it's out of balance and it needs to be adjusted. How do we do that? This knob here, as you turn it one way or the other, it moves this axle on the axis right here where this axle meets this hole, and it turns that idler wheel here in and out. And so if it goes this way, it lets it climb back up this way. If you get her torqued that way, it'll climb back up that way. So you can adjust this guy to get that belt sound centered. Excuse me. I'll show you that right now. Okay, so you can see how it'd go back and forth and it squares up and all that jazz, blah, 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 blah. The whole idea on doing this video is so that if you're thinking about going and picking this up for whatever reason, I can kind of give you a couple ideas of why I had it, what it's good for, what it's not good for. If you're going to be trying to cope stuff on here, or, cut, little doohickeys out of there, say you had a whole blank and you want to cut this out of the blank of steel, probably not what you want. But if you want to radius your edges, if you want to, radius your cuts there, or you want to take the edges off material for welding it together, stuff like that, it's fantastic. One of the biggest uses I used to have for this thing is I used to make a bunch of stuff on a CNC plasma table. One of those things is actually, I found this project, this is the leftover one, and a candle holder, but it it cuts out flat like this. Now, when you run these things at 250 inches per minute and jacked up to maximum amperage and all that jazz, the cut's not the best, but something like that, that's fun because it kind of, it's aesthetic. It doesn't have to be perfect. But when you cut it outside of parameters like that for ideal cuts, it gets what they call dross, or all this slag on the back there. Especially because I used to run things down in the water to keep it cool, because when you cut big sheets of this stuff, it warps. And when you run these under the water on your plasma table, if you have a water bed, then it keeps it from warping and you can run at warp speed. Anyhow, I digress on that bit. So the reason I bring this up is because I would have this little machine by the bed. I'd pull a bunch of material off the bed when it's cut, get another sheet rolling, and as I put this from one area to another, I'd just take this guy and run it right along here with a 40 grit belt on there, and it would take all that stuff right off where it needs to. I'm not so much worried about this dross and slag here, but I want to get it knocked off the top and the bottom and clean that edge up a bit where it's going to be tack welded, because I'd have to tack weld the base on. Okay, so here's kind of a more real world, let's get some light on the subject, eh? Okay, so here's kind of like a real world deal. I got this knife putting together. That actually used to be a 5/8 drill bit, believe it or not. And I got my little brass booger for the thing that protects your thumbs there. That goes in there, and I need to cut out for, how I want it to look. This would be kind of a more real world thing, what someone would be getting this thing for, I think, kind of like the little doodad play around, stuff like this. So I'll just show you, kind of do this brass bit real quick. I like to keep a thing of water around to cool it off because I got tired of burning my fingers a long time ago. Alrighty, and then there you go. Oops, wrong way. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's not the actual one. I got a different one. But anyhow, so you get the idea of what you can do with it. Great way to get started at some silly little hobby like this. Okay, so here's a blank that was kind of, I went through and made a bunch of blanks out of files and when I was around the forge there, and this is one that I haven't really done anything with because I'm not real super stoked with it, but we'll see what we can do. Give you a little demonstration using this guy, what for turning it into something prettier than it is now. Have that. I'll spare you the rest of it, but that's just a real quick deal to see that you can start shaping this thing up. I might go at this with something different for a while before switching over to this guy. Personally, I use one of them handheld belt sanders, stick it upside down in a vise. That gives you a real nice big playing field to work on everything with. And then I'll come back over here and work on all my features on there. Or, I mean, heck, use a bench grinder, depending on where I'm at. I'll use dang angle grinder. So there you go. You kind of get a good idea if you're looking at using this to start getting into building knives or whatever have you. So let's move on. Great for different things. I'll show you a few more things and then wrap the video up. And you can leave a unhappy comment and thumbs down and all that bullshit. The last bit here, I'll kind of show you. I mentioned removing this, so I'll take this off sometimes to give me, I don't know, functionability or whatever you call it for certain things. So say, I've got a product I make here, the Hotline Fire Tool, and, you know, when I'm making these and not having someone else make them, this is where this thing comes in handy, taking this thing off. I'll just show you so you can see. So the whole idea there is to break all the edges nice and smooth. Like so, removing that thing allows me to nicely get in there, and it lets this flex. That's what the whole name of the game there is. If you need it around an edge over like that, you can work this guy on there, and it will move with you, which kind of helps for that. Another thing this thing is great for, if you got a bunch of Pulaskis or axes or hatchets or knives or stuff to sharpen, this thing's pretty good for that. You can get some of the finer belts. None of that Benchmade crap for me. I like stuff I can break and sharpen on something like this. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of some stuff you can do with it. Maybe that can kind of show you some limits, but as you can see, as far as trying to start kind of making some knives, you could get by with this little bugger. I'm sure people will complain in the comments that, oh, it's not some fancy name off of Pinterest or whatever, but I mean, really, I make most of my knives with a friggin' belt sander and a vise. I'm not saying they're nice knives, but they get the job done.